Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your first hurricane outlook and discussion for the 2015 Atlantic hurricane season. So glad you could join me here. If you're watching this on our app or on our client services page or just on YouTube, I appreciate the time and attention. Today I'm going to take a look at climatology, the first 10 days of June, where we can expect development. Typically in this region of the Gulf of Mexico, a few development areas, the Northwest Caribbean Sea, and then a few down and around the Florida Keys and in the Bahamas. Those are the typical hot spots for this time of year. Over the past 100 years or so, that's where we have seen development in the past. You can see that the Eastern Pacific, quite a bit busier, and that is not breaking precedents today. It is very busy right now. We have Tropical Storm Andres and Tropical Storm, I guess it's Blanca, something out there. We'll take a look at that in just a minute. So this is what it looks like on June 1st. This is where we're headed, maybe, before you go, wow, what's that? This is the climatology of September 1st through the 10th. So you can see that things do typically get very busy. This year they're not expecting it to be as busy because of the El Nino in the Pacific, creating hostile conditions, especially through this region here. Probably not going to add too many dots to this map after 2015 in this region right through here, what we call the main development region, because the upper level winds and the dry air and the sinking air through this region probably just not going to allow much to happen. So we're going to have to be watching basically this area pretty closely all hurricane season long for something to kind of come out and take advantage of ideal conditions out of the deep tropics. The Eastern Pacific stays very busy throughout the hurricane season, and this year it's probably going to be busier than normal because of that El Nino. So speaking of that, let's take a look at sea surface temperature anomalies. You can clearly see this very large and prominent plume of warmer than average water extending westward along the equator and a couple of degrees south, but much further north. Very, very warm Pacific Ocean compared to where it should be. And conversely, the Atlantic Ocean here, especially in the deep tropics, cooler than normal. However, over the last couple of weeks or so, this region has warmed to the plus side of average, above average, and it's eroding the negative effects just a little bit. How much that persists or does it grow remains to be seen. But let me just tell you something. When you see very warm water relative to average way up here in the subtropics, displaced out of the deep tropics, that's typically a sign of an inactive deep tropic hurricane season. In other words, we won't get much developing in this area, as I pointed out in the previous map. So we'll have to see. I think that once again, like last year, hurricanes are going to reach their peak intensities north of 20 degrees latitude, more than likely. So that's where we live. And, you know, folks like Bermuda and up in the Canadian Maritimes, all of this very warm water relative to average sitting up there. So we will watch this very closely, as will we be watching this. This is the subsurface version of the prior map. And so this is the Eastern Pacific over here. This would be the Western Pacific on this side. The top represents the surface of the Pacific, and the bottom of the chart here shows us about 450 plus meters deep. And so this is a slice of temperature anomalies through the equatorial Pacific. And clearly this large area of positive anomaly shows up very nicely. This orange color spreading from South America all the way westward to almost 180 degrees, 160 degrees east longitude. And that represents about a degree Celsius above the long-term average. And you say, well, that's not that much, a degree Celsius, come on. But you're talking about warming an enormous volume of water, 1 degree Celsius. That represents a tremendous, almost incalculable amount of energy in the ocean that wasn't there before. And that's going to cause a lot of interesting things to happen around the globe over the next 6 to 9 months, maybe more. But then we do have this large area of cold anomalies trying to develop to the west of this warm pool. And I think that we're going to start to see this erode and this start to make inroads to the east and start to become more prevalent. We're going to watch this every week. But right now, this El Nino signature here on the subsurface chart, as well as the typical surface map we see here, very prevalent right now. The Gulf of Mexico also above the long-term average, as is the Southwest Atlantic. Has nothing to do with the El Nino. Now, real quick, why does the El Nino matter? Well, typically when we have this very warm water compared to average, you have a lot more upward motion going on over here, and the air rises in the Pacific and then sinks in the Atlantic, and that sinking air dries out. It also creates these streaks of wind in the upper atmosphere that tears hurricanes apart before they can even develop in many cases. But once in a while, you get these tropical waves that come off, and they stay very innocuous until they reach an area around the United States within a couple of days, 2 to 3 days away. And then in the subtropics up here, the El Nino really doesn't have much of an influence. It's mainly the Caribbean and the deep tropics out here that this very warm water sort of throws a wet blanket on, if you will. So that's why these anomalies are important from one sense, how they can affect other basins, and also the amount of energy or heat that's in the ocean to provide fuel for hurricanes. Notice too that the water right off of the Mexican coastline here, quite a bit above the long-term average, as it is all the way out even towards Hawaii. So I think we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Pacific systems and only a few days out of the year of the season talking about Atlantic systems. So the question is, are we going to be talking about a potent Atlantic system or two? Well, nobody can tell us that this early, so we'll just have to wait and see. So let's go from anomalies or departures from normal and look at actual sea surface temperatures. And the scale here, anything on this side is 26 degrees Celsius or about 79.5 Fahrenheit or higher. So you notice most of the Gulf of Mexico is 28, 29, even some pockets of 30 degrees Celsius down here in the Florida Bay, right off the coast of Louisiana. We're talking very warm water. The Gulf is typically very warm. It's a little bit warmer than it should be for this time of year, and that won't matter unless there's a hurricane in there with ideal upper level conditions. We'll have to wait and see. The water is certainly warm enough. Off the east coast of the United States, check this out. The 26 degree line right here, 26 Celsius, everything to the right is ready for hurricanes, if you will. And so this snakes all the way from, just a few hundred miles south and east of Cape Cod, where a slushy frozen Atlantic existed just several weeks ago, and now the water temperatures are approaching, especially right here, in the lower 80s. That's incredible. I talked about that in a previous discussion. Pamlico Sound, nice and warm, low 80s right off the coast of North and South Carolina and down the east coast of Florida as well. All of this will be something that we watch if we have a hurricane to take advantage of it. So what's going on out there? Well, this is the first day of the tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center, and as you can see here, tropical cyclone activity not expected within the next 48 hours or so. Now, let's take a look at this, a new product, the graphical 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook. Nothing indicated in the chart here, but as I'll show you in a moment, there's a chance that something's going to try to get going in this region over the next week or so. We'll take a look at that in a moment. Meanwhile, the eastern Pacific, very busy. No new tropical cyclones forecast to develop, so that's an important distinction. I click on it and there's nothing there, but that's because there's nothing new forecast to develop. So if we go back to the home page and we go to the eastern Pacific, we see the active activity, and there it is. We have very powerful Hurricane Andres and then Blanca sitting here just to the south of Mexico. Now, Andres, not going to be a problem. Some of the moisture will try to get pulled or advected into the southwest United States over the next few days, but this one could be much more of a problem for the Baja over time. Let's take a look at the forecast track from the Hurricane Center, and it is progged to be a major hurricane. I believe that's called Socorro Island or something like that, but it's going to kind of meander and then finally start moving off to the northwest, Cabo San Lucas, and points north. This is another hurricane season. I mentioned this the other day on last week's update. that this is the kind of year where we could get a lot of activity into southwest Mexico and into the Baja, though I didn't think it would happen until September and October. It looks like it's going to have an early start, and I can show you the evidence for that. This is the GFS. Basically, this is what we're looking at right now. The west coast of the U.S. right here. There's the Baja. Here's the Carolinas and Florida, just to kind of outline what's what. And here is the Pacific Ocean over here, and the Western Atlantic and Gulf right here. So watch what happens. This is 24 hours from now, and not much going on. A little bit of a flare-up of convection and shower activity down in the Caribbean. 48 hours from now, there is Andres, way out, quite far to the west of Mexico, so no worries. More sort of conglomeration of convective activity over the Caribbean and parts of the Western Atlantic there, north of Cuba perhaps. Then at 72 hours, Andres sitting out here, no problem at all. But we do have these lowering pressures down here and this kind of convergence going on where something might try to develop. And at 96 hours, a little bit more definitive shower and thunderstorm activity. Andres starts to really weaken, and then watch what happens right down here as Blanca starts to come into the picture by day 5, 120 hours. There's the northern extent of what could be very powerful Hurricane Blanca, and then look what happens. Boom, 1,005 millibar low in the Bahamas. More than likely a sheared, ugly-looking system, but folks in Cuba, the Bahamas, you're going to want to watch this because around day 5 or so, we may have something to try to develop, tropical, subtropical in nature, loosely organized, kind of like I said, a hybrid, sort of ugly, disorganized type of early June system. Then I went ahead and wanted to show you, I believe this is 168 hours out, a week away. This is important right here. This is Blanca coming up according to the GFS. Whoops, let's take that back down. Into parts of the Baja, perhaps. And then right here you see this moisture coming in. That's Arizona, and that's western New Mexico. This could be a problem. Flooding rains already for the southwest United States. We certainly don't need it over here, and hopefully it'll stay away from Texas. Maybe West Texas can get in on the action, but we don't need inches of it. And then look at what we have here. This is the system that comes up out of the Caribbean. Pretty decent tropical storm, maybe. I think the next one is Bill, if I'm not mistaken. And we've already had Anna, so the next one's Bill. So it could be an interesting week ahead in the tropics, both for the Pacific and the Atlantic, as we start the season off quite busy. A couple things I want to point out to you. Wednesday, I'll be leaving my office, my home here in Wilmington, and I'll be making my way over towards Houston, Texas here for the Houston Galveston Ready or Not Hurricane Workshop. That is this coming Saturday. I'll be there with the Chevy Tahoe with all kinds of equipment on display. Come on out and learn from our group as well as others who attend the unbelievably well put together Hurricane Expo. Then we will head up towards Amarillo, Texas, where a week from today we're going to launch our Herbie Hurricane Research Balloon payload via weather balloon into the atmosphere for our annual test. That'll take place in Amarillo, Texas on Monday morning, June the 8th, bright and early. I will have a blog post about it, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, Instagram. We'll be talking all about that as we start to test our equipment and be ready for the season ahead. So that'll be exciting to watch as well. So lots and lots of stuff going on as we start the hurricane season here on June the 1st, 2015. Well, that is it from me for today. I am Mark Sudduth, kind of out of breath here. Thanks for tuning in. It's always a pleasure to be able to hopefully educate you about what's going on in the tropics, and we'll have a lot of stuff for you this year to help keep you prepared, keep you in the know with facts, no hype and no made up whatever to get you all excited over nothing. Believe me, if something comes along that we're worried about, we're going to make sure that you're aware of it. But everything else, we're going to just try to educate you along the way. Have a good rest of the week ahead. Again, I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. I'll be back again tomorrow and Wednesday, and then it's time to hit the road.